Namaste. Last week, as part of the series on Sri Aurobindo's life through his poems, we were discovering how Sri Aurobindo, as the lover of humanity, and if we look at Sri Aurobindo's poems in the early part and his life, really very impartially, I'm saying, you would see a tremendous love that is there in his heart. It's so palpable, and one has to be blind in the heart to miss it, and to just look at him as a professor, and all through that love is so palpable, and it's there in his poems. Every shade of love, human love I'm speaking of, one can imagine is there in Sri Aurobindo's poem. Every shade, from the highest to all shades of love are there expressed, and of all kinds. There is that famous poem, The Spring Child Vasanti, and let me just read a couple of lines there, to the spring child Vasanti, where he's simply wishing happy birthday to a child. Now, can we imagine, we go, we wish, we give some gifts and all that, but here is Sri Aurobindo, the Lord of all, wishing to the spring child Vasanti. This is Jest 1900. So this is just around the time that Sri Aurobindo is turning. Now, it's amazing. Sri Aurobindo did not have physically his own child. So when you look at it like that, there are people who don't have a child, who don't lead a so-called, life of a grahast in that sense. And they become very dry because they don't understand what it is. But look at Sri Aurobindo. Without having a child, look at the love that exudes from his heart. This is actually written for a child's birthday, Basanti's birthday, blessed child, for whom he has written. Of spring is a name for whose bud and blooming we praise today the giver. Of spring and its sweetness clings about her. For her face is spring, and springs without her, as loath to leave her. Without her, spring will be like, loath to leave her. And it's a long poem, but just to, O dear child soul, our loved and cherished, for this thy days had birth, like some tender flower on a grey stone portal, to sweeten and flush with childhood immortal the aging earth. There are flowers in God's garden of prouder blooming, brilliant and bold and bright. The tulip and rose are fierier and brighter, but this is a softer hue, a whiter and milder light. So he's actually foreseeing the future, the personality, that there are different personalities, but you have this personality of being soft and tender. That's your, but there's an innocent purity about you. And this is how in 1900 he's literally writing a birthday card. There's another one which of course is written later to R on her birthday. So he's the lover of humanity, and what kind of love they must have exuded on everybody who was around. Last time we touched a little bit about, his love, Mrinali Devi, where he says that a love which is based on physical appearance doesn't last long. And a love which is based on qualities, voice and other things may reach till the pyre, but doesn't go beyond. But when we see ourselves in the beloved, that's a love which can go beyond the pyre and the grave and return back hand in hand to pursue the great, immortal journey. So this is the kind of love he embodied, but that is the different, that somebody who is born for greater things. This itself is a benchmark. If Sri Aurobindo would have just remained a lover of humanity, it would have been something wonderful. But this is the difference, that suddenly the life of someone who is marked for a spiritual life, he's showing us the steps and the stages, can never be satisfied within the human formula. Everything is fine. If you look at Sri Aurobindo's life, so Sri Aurobindo says that also, that this kind of vairag and this talk about vairag, especially this kind of tamasic vairag, where your life has been disappointing and you want to turn to God, it will not work out. Even when you go to God or you enter an ashram life, you will still be seeking and craving the same things. So that vairagi doesn't work. Even a rajasic vairagi, born out of temporary disappointment. Tamasic is where one doesn't want to put in effort. So, a monastic life offers you that, okay, you'll be taken care of. All that you have to do is wear a certain kind of code of dress and do some mala and prayers, and that's good. We know what happens there recently, suicide and all that. That's how it is. It doesn't change nature. Then there is another kind of vairagya, which is rajasic, where you are doing very well and you have meet with disappointment in life. Now in Sri Aurobindo's life, we see all through. It's a brilliant career. He's extraordinarily brilliant, and he has got a job which people would covet. So there is no vairagya of that kind. But in spite of all that, he knows that this is the limits of the human formula. And that is why the mother says that who is ready for the supermanhood? She says those who, in spite of everything within the human life, still know its limitations, still know its inadequacies. That's what we see in one of his poems, early days, A Doubt. What is the doubt of the Lord? Many boons the New Year's make us. So he must have also celebrated New Year, felt, in New Year people have a party, people drink, people dance, so all that happens. Many boons the New Year's make us, but the old world's gifts were three. Dove of Cyprus, wine of Bacchus, Pan's sweet pipe in Sicily. So there was music, there was dance, and there is that kind of gaiety in the atmosphere. This is what the old world gave. Love, wine, song, the core of living, even at the highest. What is love? At the highest, it is divine love. That is the core of living. What is wine? It is the ananda, somras. And what is the song? The rhythm, the divine rhythm according to which life must move. But at the lowest level, this is what it tends to, replicate. The core of living, sweetest, oldest, musicalest. If at end of forward striving, these, life's first, proved also best? Question mark. Is this all? Ultimately, this kind of enjoyment, human life, in his own life, when we see it, like a life which he could have just enjoyed. But there is something else which is happening at that point of time, because he is, the avatar, and this transition that we see on Sri Aurobindo in many ways reminds me of Sri Krishna's transition. So Sri Krishna has come to bring love and delight and freedom to mankind. And we see him dancing with the gopi. Of course, many parallel things are happening along with that. And suddenly we see the Sri Krishna of Vrindavan changing over to, one who, the slayer of Kansha, and then the Mahabharata, because he knows the world is not ready for this delight, for this love that he has brought to earth. And something similar we see in Sri Aurobindo's life, that till then, if we really look closely at his life, and he describes it, he says, somebody said that, during his young days, he used to have a rolling laughter. He said, well, I used to laugh a lot, but not a rolling laughter, as somebody has said. So, but he used to laugh. He describes that experience when there was a cricket match, and with the cricket team, after that, they all said the only time he played cricket was in Cambridge. But he was also part of that, Baroda, and they sit together on a table, and, they sit together and have a little fun. He describes all that. He had those experiences as a human being. But he knew the limits to which these experiences go. Our problem is we start with that and think this is the end. So he goes because suddenly he sees, like Krishna in Vrindavan, that no, I can't be dancing forever. I can't be just releasing the energies of love because the world is not ready. So he sees the world is not ready, and there is a greater call that comes upon him. And that is what I want to read today. One of his Bengali poems, translated in English. I think the translation is either by Arindam Da or by Nalini Da. I'm not too sure. Bengali writings are generally translated by Arindam Da. But poems, some of them have been by Nalini Da. So I don't know this particular one. But here, let me see if they say, no, they've just written the section poetry. Now, at that point of time, something is happening in India. Sri Aurobindo has a very good job. He has got a very secure life. He's married 1900 to, one of the most, Rani Devi was extremely beautiful. So what else could one want in life? But there is another call that is beginning to ring inside him. He is born to slay the darkness of the age. But before doing that, he must slay the darkness that is around him. And what is that darkness around him is in India itself. India has become like a fallen race. There were that time people who were supplicating to the Britishers, who were, who believed in prayer and petition. That is how it used to go. And we see his writings in the Hindu Prakash, which he started with that, new lamps for the old, which he abandoned. So simultaneously, we see three movements going on in Sri Aurobindo's life. One is the lover of humanity. Second is the urge towards India's freedom. And the third is the spiritual core, which is beginning to emerge. So here we see a combination, beautiful blend in this poem of the spiritual and the nationalist. For Sri Aurobindo, all through, nationalism was a religion, it was a spiritual nationalism. It was never the kind of nationalism that we understand. So India was the mother, and she had to be awakened. And she is indeed awake. And if you read this poem, Sri Aurobindo hears the cry. This is 1900. Actually, before even the, if you see the history, the armed revolution as it is called, it starts a little later. 1902, Bagh Jatin, he, known as Bagh Jatin, he is the one who comes, Sri Aurobindo meets him, and there is a rumbling going on, and there are people who come together. They want to have an armed revolt against the British. Before that, the policy is prayer and petition. You are our Lord. Anyways, you are wonderful. You give us very good education. You give us food. Can you allow us a little more freedom? And Sri Aurobindo is to speak about Purn Swaraj. Nobody has till that point of time ever spoken. So this is 1900, when people still believe that it is through the Britishers that the emancipation of India will come. And all that they are asking for is somewhat a little bit of freedom. And what is that freedom? For their people also to be represented. What is that freedom? If we ask in very plain terms, give us a little bit of power to some of us. And in 1900, Sri Aurobindo writes this poem, The Mother Awakes. It's an amazing poem. It is midnight. So we hear about the divine coming in midnight. Adhi Raat Prabhu Darshan Denge. We hear about Shri Krishna born at 12. It's midnight. It's literally midnight at that point of time. India lies absolutely fallen. And he hears the cry, it is midnight, the world is asleep in silence. The earth is asleep in the lap of darkness. Darkness of ignorance. Asleep are the heavens, breathless the wrathful winds. Heavens are also asleep. So, gods are still to, take human. They are still watching the play from there. They know that the avatar is there, but they are still watching. Let's see what's happening. So they are also asleep. The stars twinkle not in the dense blackness of the clouds. This is the state when, literally it describes the state when Sri Aurobindo would have come and looked upon this world. Golden he came, armed with the flame, and looked upon the world that his greatness must free. Might and greatness must free. The birds wrap their eyes with their wings. What an image this is. Even those who were capable of flying, in their thoughts, in their minds, they have covered their eyes. They don't want to see what's happening. They are happy in their little homes. And rest, self-absorbed in their nests. I am getting a good pay. I am happy. I have got a lovely life. Why should I bother? Sri Aurobindo himself, we will look at it, has got a very comfortable life outwardly. Animals wander not, nor are footsteps heard. Even these animals would be helpful because there will be some anarchy, some breakage, some rousing of people. In that dense night, something is happening. Nobody has heard. Sri Aurobindo hears the cry. Then the mother awakes. The mother awakes with a terrible cry. The mother awakes, opens her frightful eyes as though a pair of suns. That time she comes. What are you people doing? Lost in tamas? And then we see how, why in Sri Aurobindo's subsequent sadhana, we see Krishna and Kali, not Krishna and Radha. World is not ready for that. Krishna and Kali. The mother awakes, not a leaf moves. The still flame of the lamp is dying in the room. In the lonely paths of the city. What is that still flame of the lamp? Is the mental thought. People have become abject slaves. They can't even think for themselves. There is no original thought. There is just a mass of superstitions, dead rituals, which they call as tradition, and people mock at it but allow it. That was the British rule. In the lonely paths of the city, in the fields and the woodlands and the hills, plunges in sleep all life. The surges of the sea waters break not in laughter upon the shores. Utterly still, unmoving, the ocean is voiceless. Entire state of tamas. Ocean is the world forces. They've all accepted all over the world. This is how life will be. So better accept. The Britishers will sing, dance, enjoy. And outside the cinema halls will be written, dogs and Indians not allowed. And if somebody is allowed to enter and just stand for a while, oh, he is so great. See, they are so nice. They do recognize after all. And to some person they will give a knighthood and will be very happy. Sir called by. It is a ploy, just like, many of the prizes that are given today. So it was a ploy to make some people very happy, to appease. Why then does the mother awake? World is asleep. They don't want her. Now we remember in Savitri, when the mother tells Sri Aurobindo, Ashupati, no soul is thy companion in the night, in the light. What thou hast asked, what thou hast won is thine, but ask no more. Nobody is asking for this. Why she is awake? Who can tell what has she heard and is awake? Maybe a prayer from his heart, we don't know. In the night, whose is the silent prayer that has awakened the mother to rise with a terrible cry? And who else can write about this prayer which has gone from the silent heart except the one who has prayed? So many aspects of Sri Aurobindo's life which we see scattered as these experiences. Who will say who has prayed? Except the one who has prayed will know with certainty what he must have seen all around and prayed. When the mother fell asleep, whoever hoped that even in the midst of blind darkness she will awake? Sunk in the night, void of hope, the heart broken for good in sorrow. That is the state described exactly of the Indian people and perhaps the world at large during that time. Broken in sorrow, because it is accepted. Some 400 years of Mughal rule, then British rule, in between pockets of Dutch colonies and French colonies, and we are people meant for the mud. This is what was told. What kind of gods you have? You pray to a stone, you don't even know, you don't have one God, you have so many you have so many cults, we have one God, one scripture. Not realizing that this is a weakness, but that comes much later. Even in sleep is startled to hear the fall of a leaf. Such is the fear that if a leaf falls, oh my God. I remember this, my parents, they were this about early 1900, maybe 1920, 30, around that time, or maybe 35. So they were traveling in a train, first class compartment on a pass, and suddenly when my father, mother, and my mother's mother, and then suddenly they used to call Gore log. So the Britishers came, drunk, and no reservation required. They left this legacy that travel without passes, tickets. Actually, I'm telling you, people who lived that time, it was like my train. How does it matter? In one's own country, one behaves differently. Like Indians in Singapore, see, they will not throw anything. So they came and they occupied, and they are like, it doesn't matter. They are looking, trying to pass lewd remarks, and my father's blood is boiling, and suddenly my father says, better to leave this compartment. Then my nani was a dabang. She told, what dare you, how dare you do this, get out, and all that. She could say that. But this was the state of fear. That look here, it's your own country, but anybody could come anytime and you feel threatened. They were good people, but that's not the issue. There are good people always, everywhere, in everyone. But the totality, the reign of fear. So he is describing the fear. Even in sleep is startled to hear the fall of a leaf. The royal fortune of the mighty Asura, proud and cunning and overpowering. The perfect description. Has besieged the earth. Suddenly a terrible cry is heard. The cry of the mother. Suddenly, like the roar of hundreds of oceans, is heard the voice of the mother. To awaken her sons, called aloud the mother like a thunderclap. Wake up, wake up, my children, wake up, my children. Why are you slumbering? Wake up the gods. So he's describing that state before creation when even the gods are not awake. They are watching the play. So she's calling them. Around 1903, it's at one point, Sri Aurobindo also remarked it, that many of the people who came close to Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who served them, you'll see they are born around that period. And when somebody asks Sri Aurobindo about this, he says, yes, when the divine comes, he does not come alone. He comes along with those godlike beings like Duman Bhai. He did say that he is a Vedic seer. So like that, there are beings whom we don't know who they were. And they came. Pavitrada, aspects of Sri Ramakrishna and Christ. They were embodiment. The mother was crying, calling them. And the avatar is already in the midst. So now these souls have to come and do his work. With a grieving, heaving heart, was there none awake in the darkest of night for the sake of the mother? A few only with saffron robes covering their bodies. So you see this, the link of the Naga revolt. There is the Bande Matram, the Anand Mat, which Sri Aurobindo has translated. He translated 15 chapters, not the entire book. First the 13 chapters, then later the first 2 chapters also. It comes as a, so there we see this revolt of the sannyasis. And Barinda had taken this idea very deeply. And he also wanted the revolt of the sannyasis, and which we see in Bande Matram writings during that time, much later of course, where he wanted Sri Aurobindo to write a pamphlet to call people for an organized revolt. That time it was still something which was brewing. So that time Bhavani Mandir was written, that we want to build a temple. And Sri Aurobindo says it was done at Barin's behest. He requested him to write and he wrote. Now, some people take it this way that it's not Sri Aurobindo's writing. If the Lord has sanctioned, he has sanctioned. It's very powerful writing. But it's just the context he has given. This was not his ultimate way, because he knew this is not going to work. A few only with saffron robes covering their bodies sat in the temple with the bare sword in hand. So you see the entire, he has written about Bankim Chand. There are chapters where he speaks about Bankim Chand, translated the Anand Bhatt, spoke about Bande Matram as the mantra. He has given an obituary, on Bankim Chand Chatterjee. So this we see reflected in this poem where he is invoking the Divine Mother. Devotees of the terrible Mother, to anoint with their own blood the mother's feet, wakeful they pass the night. So this is how he must be, his heart, sensitive heart, must be experiencing the darkness around and what he could do for it. Hence rose the mother. So there were some. So it is also that even if the darkness is darkest, keep invoking and calling her. With a mighty thirst in wrath awoke the mother. With a lion's roar filling the universe awoke the mother to awaken the world. Raucous laughter spurts out of her mouth. Kali's attahas. A lightning flash gleams in her eyes. Frightful is the blood-red flower of her anger. Java fool, power, which is, symbol of that. In wrath, she swings in her hands the heads of 2 titans. The mother rises and sends out a grim invocation. Much later, Sri Aurobindo would write, with the wind and the weather beating around me. But now he is awakening the mother in his own blood, in his own body, and in the whole nation and the world. Thou sprayest rain of blood over the land. So this, even Bhavani Bharati, we can see these are the seeds of the great revolutionary. It was Kali that Sri Aurobindo had literally invoked within him. And for a long time, Sri Aurobindo signed his name as Kali. And he was so identified with Mother Kali. So people often know of Sri Ramakrishna's invocation of Kali. But they don't know of Sri Aurobindo's invocation of Kali, and not just like a prayer and worship, but a kind of identity which he inflamed. But what is beautiful is that all this tremendous power he could contain within. He did not sing, dance, jump outwardly. He continued to remain quiet. Bhola bhala, sadhu bacha, gentleman, perfect gentleman. What's happening inside we can see. What thou at this dead of night stringing the titan heads in thy hands, thou sprayest rain of blood over the land. The two eyes are like hearths of fire. Fearful is the mother, shaking the earth she roams about. So after that we see 1857 was the that last bit of that revolt which took place, Jhansi Ki Rani. And Sri Aurobindo says Sri Krishna's action continues till that point of time. And then the last fires smolder under. And 1886, if I am not mistaken, Sri Ramakrishna passed away. And in front, Swami Vivekananda is there, 1904 or 2, I may be mistaken. He also leaves his body. In between, we see around the time when this fire has to start, there is actually nothing. There is a long period, 40 long years. When people are abject, we cannot imagine that period. We know about the freedom movement, what they must be experiencing, and the kind of slavery they have got accustomed to. It's our land, but no, it's their land. And all kinds of drama, the Aryan people, the Aryan Dravidian divide. Oh, Aryans were also invaders. We are also invaders. What's wrong with it? We are a superior race. All this completely fallen. At that time, Sri Aurobindo invokes, and the mother arises with a loud roar. Arise, arise. Thy voice rises to chase all sweet indolence. That's why he writes in his letter to Mrilani Devi. It's not that I don't love you. These words I am adding. But it amounts to that because she feels, she misses out. She says, it's not that I don't love you. But what do I do when the 300 million people, they are knocking at my door, the whole country needs me. And I know I have the power to lift the fallen race. So he says, what do I do? Should I leave? And same thing in, Sri Aurobindo's Sanskrit poem, where he speaks about in Bhavani Bharati that ultimately, what do I do? What do you do when the titan is sitting on your mother's breast and sucking her blood? And later on, in casual remark in evening talks, he says, Gandhi's non-violence, all that is very fine. But what will you do if Hitler invades with his army? You are going to plead to him non-violence? He will find no better passage than this. So what do you do? So he must be... Now he had brought this time the power of the sword. The chakra which is on the discus of Shri Krishna is actually the light. So this time he said, okay, this chakra can cut one head, two heads. But with this light embodied within my brain and my pen, I am going to make many heads fall. And if you look at that, from Sri Aurobindo, the armed revolt, the uprising started again. Now he is not, he didn't do it dramatically, that took a gun like Mangal Pandey and fired. And then he didn't do it dramatically. But he did pick up another gun, which was unseen. And with that he fired the fire of patriotism and nationalism in a nation which was asleep. So actually I would say the revival of the entire freedom movement was indeed with coming of Sri Aurobindo. And he started from within outward. That is his method. He invoked the mother. Before we are going to do, has to be a propitiation. So whom do you propitiate? You propitiate the Divine Mother, and Yagyavedi is being formed. It is our mother who is coming and asking for sacrifice. It's our mother. She comes, on her forehead burns her eye of death. Dancing to the rhythm of the clanging of a necklace of human skulls, lo, the mother comes. Arise, arise, a violent voice calls. Gods and titans and men, all, a cruel roar here, a high cry of joy there. It is my mother. And all of them came. At that point of time, we suddenly see the early part of the previous century. Suddenly, there is a surge of activities in every area. In the midst of storm and battle, sword crashes against sword, body to body resounding. Fire reigns and rushes about in the fight. The skies are deafened. With all the fierce noises, the ears burst, the earth sways. Blood flows and flows free as though flowing streams. When, oh when shall we know the mother? Now he gives something very beautiful. When her call goes out like the ocean roar, wiping off with a mighty breath the whole kingdom of the Titans, and the violent goddess comes smiling, then shall we know the mother. So the doom of the empire was actually decided in 1900, We see many events taking place at that point of time. Sri Aurobindo's on one side physical marriage. 1902, actually it starts with Sri Aurobindo, the revolutionary movement physically, and this is Sri Aurobindo's own words. So around the turn of the century, 1900, and he is invoking the Divine Mother, and the Mother in the form of Kali comes. The Mother, when she dances, bathing in the stream of flowing blood, and he has foreseen what's going to happen. Then surely we know it is the Mother awakened at last. So she comes, and no wonder around that time a series of experiences begin. And we see that, while in Baroda, now already these two movements have started. He is a mission child. Now, when there is a mission person, he is protected also. He is the one who has come to do the work, so there is a special protection. And that we see in that poem, The Godhead, I sat behind the dance of danger's hooves, which describes Sri Aurobindo's experience that he is going in a carriage on the roads of Baroda. Suddenly one of the wheel comes out, and the accident could be fatal. But he sees from within him a Godhead surge forth. That's why he says that the avatar is always divine, but he is the progressive manifestation that takes place. So during that period from 1900 to 1905 specifically, we see the lover of humanity transmuting into the lover of India, and eventually into the God lover and the lover of, from the highest standpoint, embodying that love. So we see during this period 1900 to 1905. 1905 he completely plunges, but already it has started. And the spiritual experiences start. And he, in fact, undertakes spiritual practices so that, pranayam, for example, 4 to 6 hours a day for 9 months is not a joke. I'm not sure if people advocating pranayam do like this way. And he says that 200 lines of poetry could come through, and he experiences, his hairs developed a shine, and he experiences tremendous vitality and all these things. If he did not advocate these methods, it is because he found a much simpler way and a much more complete way. And that is the Mother. But we, his children, why he didn't teach us something about pranayam? Let's do pranayam, okay? Fine. He's not saying no. Go the long way. The short way is give the prana to the Mother. That's what he says. And the rest is done for you. But we find it too easy. Why? Because our human arrogance, mind. No, I must do something. At the end of this, I should have the right to say I am a yogi. I must claim that I have done yoga. If Mother has done everything, then where am I a yogi? Not realizing is the highest of yoga to be surrendered to the Lord. That's what we see in the Gita. At the end of teaching everything, the Lord says, look here, I'm telling you the greatest secret. Sarv dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. So it's not easy to surrender because the entire ego personality resists. It doesn't want. It constantly says I. And to surrender to the divine means thou. It's no more I. So this is a state which is, we see, and then when yoga starts, there is something very interesting which Sri Aurobindo speaks about. Like everybody else, human nature, there are sides and aspects of human nature which is part of the surface personality. So he is embodied himself. He has taken a physical body in the world. He is in contact with the world. So there is a surface personality which is formed. The Godhead is the inner being. That is his secret truth. So in every one, later on, Sri Aurobindo says there are two parts. One is the surface personality, which average human being thinks it is that person. If the surface personality is gone, it is physical constitution plus habits which one has acquired from the environment, which one has acquired from, the education, if we can use the word education, and society and everything around, and that forms a surface personality. Like for instance, a person says, oh, how are you doing? So now, some people are very impressed with this. But basically you have acquired a way of speaking. It's a surface personality, nothing more. You may speak a very stylish language, whether it be Hindi or English or anything. But that's something which you have picked up. There are people who speak very well. That's something they have picked up from the environment. Speak very well means these kind of external. Some people dress very well. And people say, oh, what a personality. Now, this is not the real person. There is something else which is inside, that's the inner being. That's what we see in Sri Aurobindo beginning to take over the outer. But the outer is still there. That's why in Devasuri Sampada, Sri Aurobindo says very clearly, chapter 16th of the Gita, that it's not like some people are godlike devas and others are asuras. Because, he knows what we are going to do. Devasuri Sampada, you asura, I am deva. He says it's not like that. He says man is an asura by birth. It's all of us. And there is something hidden there also, secret. It is that asuric nature which is converted is also part of the divine work. And that becomes a powerful instrument. Because who is the asura? Who has labored long, drunk the poison, all this. So, devas are what is called goody-goody beings. So, very often they lack that bal, force. So he says, man is an asura by birth. He becomes a god by conversion. So this conversion from this life of ego, life of desire, life of lust, greed, fear, which we think as everything, towards a greater light, a greater consciousness, higher consciousness, a deeper consciousness, this conversion holds within itself the seed of all the fruits of yoga that will come later. So this is the first step necessary, and Sri Aurobindo says the first step is to dissolve this faith that we have in the ego and its momentary personality. It is to dissolve this Shraddha and put this Shraddha into God. So this we see beautifully in one of his poems. And these are all before going to Pondicherry. The exact dates we don't know, but it connects with the yoga. It is on page 212, and the name of the poem is The Vedantin's Prayer. So someone asked Sri Aurobindo what this prayer indicates. He says this prayer indicates the conversion of the asura. So when a person with asuric tendency, he too has hope, he too can change. But what is needed is he can't continue and indulge ad infinitum. He has to surrender these to God and to invoke His light, His grace, His bliss into this earthly nature. That is how the change takes place. So here he gives the process of the yoga as well as something which we can see that the next 5 years, what was Sri Aurobindo preparing? Simultaneously he was preparing himself so that the entire nature becomes ready for the fullness of the divine. The Vedantin's Prayer, page 212. Spirit Supreme, who muses. This is interesting because Vedantin's prayer, Vedanta, traditional Vedanta, doesn't speak about change of nature. If you really read through, it speaks about realizing the one and breaking the mold of nature. And yet, without a certain degree of change of nature, you can't realize the one. So this is the paradox. One cannot say, I'll do whatever I feel like doing, I'll lead a life of desire and ego, and yet realize the one. No, this change is fundamental. It's not about transformation of nature, but a fundamental conversion. The Vedantin's Prayer, Spirit Supreme, who musest in the silence of the heart, eternal gleam, it's hid still deep inside. He knows it, realized it. Thou only art, this my truth, this the divine nature. Here is the real seed. Ah, wherefore with this darkness am I veiled? My sunlit part, why am I veiled? What is this darkness, this ignorance? So it is described in the Vedas, ignorance is covering the light of truth which is within. So very often people ask me the difference between ashram and the world. So ashram not as an institution again. My concern is ashram and there is a zone, a formation, special formation in which a special work goes on. The world is everywhere and the divine is everywhere. The difference is that outside, the divine within is oppressed by the world. And divine will win. He will emerge. So he is struggling to emerge. Here, the darkness is oppressed by the divine from every side. So it starts running. It wants to escape the pressure. And when it runs, it comes to the surface and is visible. Outside, it is very carefully, neatly hidden behind the dress and the smile and the words. See, there are people who have mastered the art of deception. This is what the mind teaches us. So that's the outside world, and here it comes out because there is pressure. So he's praying, my sunlit path by clouds assailed. He says, you think I have not gone through doubts? He says, I have myself not trod the sunlit path, but I know it exists. And neither me nor the mother wants you to go through that process. He has gone through it. He says everybody has gone through it. Even in Alipur jail, he goes through that I asked you not for myself but only for the country. Why have I been brought here? And then he hears the voice, wait and see. So, doubts. That's why to Dilip Kumar Roy, he could write reams after reams of letter. Because for the divine, even if there is a momentary experience, that's enough to understand what human beings experience. So he says, every human experience I have had. And we see a glimpse here of the human side of the divine avatar and the divine side. So that's what he says in Essays on the Gita. The avatar is a dual phenomena, human and the divine, both. Why am I thus disfigured by desire, distracted wholed? Every line is a marvel. Disfigured by desire. If desires don't come, life is so straight and beautiful blossoms. Scorched by the fire of fitful passions, from thy peace out thrust into the gyre. So the world is like a gyre in which one is caught, but there is the peace within. Why are we repeatedly outcast into that state? Into the gyre of every gust, betrayed to grief, overtaken with dismay, surprised by lust. We'll see every human experience. So Sri Aurobindo is not somebody who doesn't know us. That's the difference between the traditional yogas where the master says sit tight on this and just pray. The outer nature remains as it is. Here he is aware of the human experience. Let not my grey, blood-clotted past repel thy sovereign ruth, nor even delay. Blood-clotted past. These are atavisms we carry in nature. Sri Aurobindo uses the word atavism, which come from parents, which come from the environment, which comes from the circumstances of your birth and upbringing, which come from the past. Nor even delay, O lonely truth, nor let the specious gods who ape thee still deceive my youth. He is in the full-blown youth, How old is Sri Aurobindo? 1900. 28 is full-blown youth. And even if you take another 5-6 years when he plunges into the freedom movement, he's a young lad of, a young man, youthful man, 35, maybe, 33. So it's gleam of youth. He says, I don't want to be deceived by specious gods. Who are the specious gods? False gods. False gods are power, money, fame, name. These are the specious gods who ape. He says, I don't want any of these things. These clamor still. For I would hear the eternal voice and know the eternal will. So they are crowding around him. Money is chasing him. Of course, power is chasing him. All these are there around him. But he says, I don't want to be deceived by these. So that's why the avatar's life is an example for all of us. Unfortunately, many of these things we won't get in the standard biography. Or if they are placed, it's presented in a very different way. So it is the play of the human and the divine, and through that, so that he can show us the way and the process and the path. This brilliant show, cumbering the threshold of eternity, dispel, bestow. And he had lived a life like that. When the Maharaja would call him to his private functions, parties, imagine, Maharaja is like the Prime Minister of a state. Because that's how it was that time. So what an opportunity, people would grab at it. But Sri Aurobindo always avoided. So Sri Aurobindo says later, finally the Maharaja gave up on me. For him, for the Maharaja, Sri Aurobindo was a showpiece. These are the kind of people whom I have employed. What a brilliant English he speaks, and expect him to. So he knew the whole show. But naturally you will come in good favors of the Maharaja. But the Maharaja knew that Sri Aurobindo is too indispensable. He can't let go of him. Otherwise, all his harkat, all his behaviors were like, he says that, it was not like every time the Maharaja called, he would go. He knew that. But still the Maharaja gave lot of concessions because he knew after all what a priceless jewel he is. So here is that description that he knows these are clamoring. Just imagine to be so close to the Maharaja and yet he doesn't. because he wants to hear the eternal voice and know the eternal will. This brilliant show, cumbering the threshold of eternity, dispel, bestow. It looks like it will last forever. It will not. The undimmed eye, the heart grown young and clear, rebuke in me these hopes that cry so deafeningly. Oh, you are meant for this. You are a great man. You see? After all, who is there like you? You are a super genius. Hopes. And he is not counting on any of those things. He is saying, take this away. People go to God to fulfill their ambition. Here is somebody who is going and saying, take away my ambitions. People go to God to say, give me money. And he is going and saying, make sure I don't fall into the trap of money. And then God took it very seriously. So for a long time, he didn't have the money. His own prayer answered. Nobody knew. Sri Aurobindo says, I have always tried to remain in the background. It is the confounding British Empire that brought me to the forefront. He never wanted to be in the forefront. He wanted to guide the entire movement from behind. But we see that British government caught him, took to the jail, then Chittaranjan Das, then this, that, then Bande Mataram, Karmi Yogin, and suddenly we see Sri Aurobindo shot to fame, something which he didn't want. So he's saying, I don't want these hopes that cry so deafeningly. Remove my sullied centuries, restore my purity. Oh, hidden door, restore my purity. So different from make me pure. It's our nature to be pure. See, this is different from the Semitic concept that man is born impure. He is born in sin. And therefore he can be made pure by something outside. But here the conception is that man is in his deepest nature pure. But he is sullied by the lower nature. And if you remove it, the purity will emerge. O hidden door of knowledge, open, strength, fulfill thyself, love, outpour. So this is that period during which Sri Aurobindo is budding as a revolutionary, budding as a yogi. It's a period of preparation, plenty of poems we see during this period. He visits Chandot, that temple of Mother Kali. There again he has the vision of the world mother. All these things are going simultaneously and parallel until in 1910 we see him plunge into the entire revolutionary movement. And then what follows we'll read subsequently. Namaste.